The year was 1932. The Great Depression had turned the paved streets of New York into a hunting ground. In the Bronx, Dutch Schultz, a man with the temperament of a cornered rat and the bankroll of a king, looked at Harlem and saw a gold mine. The numbers game was Harlem's unofficial stock market. It was a poor man's lottery where a penny could turn into a week's rent. It was run by Madame Stephanie St. Clair, a fiercely independent immigrant from the West Indies. But Dutch didn't care about her history. He wanted her ledger. By late 32, Schultz's combination began a campaign of terror. They didn't just move in, they broke bones. They kidnapped runners. They bombed storefronts. Every other banker in Harlem folded. But St. Clair had a secret weapon, a young, brooding tactical genius named Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't your average street thug. He spent his time in the yard at Sing Sing reading Nietzsche and playing chess. He viewed the streets as a board, and Dutch Schultz was a player who relied too much on his queen. It was a bitter Tuesday in January 1933. The air in Harlem smelled of coal smoke and desperation. Bumpy had received word that one of St. Clair's top collectors was being held in a tenement basement off 135th Street. Against the advice of his circle, Bumpy went alone, or so it seemed. As he descended the creaking wooden stairs into the belly of the building, the heat from the industrial boilers hit him like a physical wall. Standing in the flickering orange light were 7 of Dutch's primary hitters. Among them was Fat Gabe, a man known for using a piano wire more than a pistol. "You're a long way from home, Bumpy," Gabe sneered, his hand resting on the hilt of a butcher's knife. The 6 men behind him fanned out, forming a semicircle. They had Bumpy pinned against a wall of hissing steam pipes. Bumpy didn't reach for his piece. He took out a cigarette, lit it with a steady hand, and exhaled a long, thin cloud of smoke. "The problem with you Bronx boys," Bumpy said, his voice a low, melodic rumble, "is you think numbers are just math. But in Harlem, numbers are people, and people, they talk." When the backup generator kicked in, the scene was gruesome. 6 men were down. Only Fat Gabe was still standing, trembling, his knife dropped on the floor. Bumpy stood 3 inches from him, his suit barely wrinkled, his cigarette still burning. Bumpy didn't kill him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. Inside was a clipping from the morning paper, a headline about Dutch Schultz's recent tax troubles. "Give this to the Dutchman," Bumpy whispered. "Tell him that in the Bronx, he's a boss. But in Harlem, he's just a guest who's overstayed his welcome. If he sends more men, I won't use the blackjack. I'll use the city." Gabe scrambled up the stairs, leaving his pride and his comrade behind. When the backup generator kicked in, the scene was gruesome. 6 men were down. Only Fat Gabe was still standing, trembling, his knife dropped on the floor. Bumpy stood 3 inches from him, his suit barely wrinkled, his cigarette still burning. Bumpy didn't kill him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. Inside was a clipping from the morning paper, a headline about Dutch Schultz's recent tax troubles. "Give this to the Dutchman," Bumpy whispered. "Tell him that in the Bronx, he's a boss. But in Harlem, he's just a guest who's overstayed his welcome. If he sends more men, I won't use the blackjack. I'll use the city." Gabe scrambled up the stairs, leaving his pride and his comrade behind. The message was clear. Bumpy hadn't just fought off an ambush. He had outthought the most feared mobster in the city. He proved that Dutch's men were soft. They relied on the sun, while Bumpy owned the shadows. When Dutch received the news, he realized for the first time that Harlem wasn't a territory to be taken. It was a fortress to be negotiated with. This led to the legendary truce, where Bumpy was eventually recognized as the unofficial governor of Harlem, a title he held until his death in 1968. That night in the boiler room became the blueprint for Bumpy's reign. Intelligence over ego, strategy over slaughter. The winter of 1933 didn't just bring snow. It brought the smell of gunpowder to 125th Street. Dutch Schultz, the beer baron of the Bronx, was hemorrhaging money because Prohibition was dying. He looked toward Harlem's policy, numbers, game, a $20 million a year empire run by a black woman, Madame Stephanie St. Clair. Dutch thought it would be a walkover. He called her the Tiger, but he thought she was a tiger in a cage. He didn't realize she had a gatekeeper, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy was 27, but his eyes were 60. He spent his nights in the back of the Lenox Avenue cafes, not drinking but studying. He studied the patrol routes of the 28th Precinct. He studied the psychological profiles of Dutch's hitmen. He knew that Dutch's men were cowboys. They liked loud guns and big cars. Bumpy liked silence and small spaces. The tension snapped on a Tuesday night. Dutch had sent a diplomatic corporate, 6 guys in overcoats, to flip one of Bumpy's banks. They didn't just flip it. They beat an old numbers runner to death. Bumpy found the body. He didn't cry. He went to the library. He read for 3 hours. Then he sent a word to the grapevine. He made himself vulnerable. He let it be known he would be at the underground cellar of the 133rd Street Speakeasy to settle a debt. The cellar was a tomb. It was a cavernous, low-ceilinged room used for storing illegal kegs and broken gambling machines. There was only one way in, a narrow, steep flight of wooden stairs, and no windows. At 3 a.m., the air was thick with the scent of damp sawdust and stale gin. Bumpy sat at a lone, circular table in the center of the room. A single 40-watt bulb hung above him, swaying slightly, casting long, rhythmic shadows. Then came the boots on the stairs. 12 of them. Dutch hadn't sent the B team. He sent the Section 6 crew, men who'd been through the beer wars of the 20s. Leading them was Icepick Willie, a man whose nickname wasn't a metaphor. They fanned out with the practiced precision of a firing squad. "You got a lot of heart, Bumpy," Willie said, clicking the safety off his Thompson submachine gun. "But heart don't stop at .45. The Dutchman says you're an interruption, and he's done being interrupted." Bumpy didn't look up from the table. He was holding a small, silver pocket watch. He was watching the second hand. "You ever wonder why a man like me, who knows your boss is a psychopath, would sit in a room with only one exit?" Bumpy asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a low, dry rasp. "Because you're arrogant," Willie sneered. "No," Bumpy said, finally looking up. His eyes were like 2 pieces of cold flint. "It's because when I lock that door from the outside, I'm trapped in here with you. But when you lock it, you're trapped in here with me." Chapter 3, 90 Seconds of Hell. Bumpy didn't reach for a gun. He reached for the table leg. He didn't just kick the table. He flipped it toward the gunman on his left, creating a split-second shield. As the first volley of gunfire shattered the wood, Bumpy pulled a heavy-duty industrial magnet from his coat and swung it at the hanging light bulb. The bulb shattered, but the magnet did something else. It shorted the exposed wire, sending a shower of sparks and plunging the room into a darkness, so thick you could taste it. Then, the rhythm of the yard took over. In the dark, the mobsters panicked. They were used to see and spray. They started shooting at the flashes of each other's muzzles. The first 30 seconds, Bumpy moved like a shadow. He didn't stay in the center. He stayed against the walls, moving clockwise. He used a straight razor, a tool he had mastered in the South Carolina street fights of his youth. It was silent. It was efficient. The middle 30 seconds, one of the gunmen, blinded and screaming, emptied a full magazine into his own partner. The sound in the small room was a physical weight, deafening Dutch's men. Bumpy used their disorientation. He grabbed a discarded Tommy gun, not to shoot, but to use as a club. The final 30 seconds. The screaming stopped. The only sound was the heavy breathing of one man. When the owner of the club finally gathered the courage to open the door with a flashlight, he nearly fainted. The basement looked like a scene from Dante's Inferno. 11 men were down, some dead, some wishing they were. Bumpy was standing by the stairs, wiping a splash of blood off his cheek with a silk handkerchief. He looked at the one survivor, a young kid named Marty, who had dropped his gun in terror. "Pick up your piece, Marty," Bumpy said. The kid shook his head, trembling. "Pick it up. Go back to the Bronx. Tell Dutch that Harlem is a sovereign nation. Tell him I don't want his money. I want his absence. If I see a Bronx plates on Lenox Avenue tomorrow, I'm coming to his breakfast table." That night changed the chemistry of New York crime. Dutch Schultz, for the first time in his life, felt fear. Not the fear of a bigger mob, but the fear of a smarter man. He eventually backed off, leaving the numbers to St. Clair and Bumpy. Bumpy didn't just win a fight. He won a reputation. For the next 35 years, he was the only man who could walk into any club in New York, Italian, Jewish, or Irish, and have a room go silent out of pure, unadulterated respect. He wasn't just a gangster. He was the king of Harlem,